The morning sun cast a pale glow across the mist-covered valley, where dew clung to every blade of grass like fragile jewels. Arman walked steadily along the dirt path, his boots crunching softly. His sister, Laila, followed a step behind, clutching a bundle of herbs against her chest. Silence hung between them, broken only by the distant crow of a rooster. Their small village awaited, huts barely visible through the haze. Arman's mind lingered on debts unpaid, on choices narrowing like the walls of a trap. Laila, sensing his burden, whispered of hope, of faith in unseen turns of fate. He nodded, but carried doubt like armor, heavy and unrelenting. The siblings entered the heart of the village, where life stirred with quiet resilience. Children ran barefoot across the dirt, laughter echoing faintly. Women, bent with years, pounded grain in rhythm, while men hauled water from the well. Arman's eyes searched faces with unease, sensing judgment for debts left unpaid. Laila forced a small smile, exchanging greetings, masking the heaviness in her chest. The scent of firewood and baked bread filled the air, yet hunger gnawed at their reality. At the center stood the elder's hut, its wooden beams weathered but firm. Arman's steps slowed, each one heavier than the last. Here, decisions waited, and truths could no longer be ignored. Arman stood before the elder's hut, its doorway draped with faded cloth, a threshold between hope and despair. The elder, with silver beard and wise eyes, sat cross-legged inside. He greeted them with a nod, gaze heavy with unspoken truth. Laila bowed respectfully, her hands trembling. Arman hesitated before kneeling, pride battling fear. The elder's voice, low yet steady, spoke of debt, of honor, of choices narrowing like rivers trapped by stone. Silence stretched between words, carrying weight beyond measure. Laila's eyes pleaded with her brother, urging restraint. But within Arman, storms gathered, waiting for release. The elder's words cut deeper than any blade, weaving memory with warning. He recalled their father's honor, once untarnished, now shadowed by debt and broken promises. Arman clenched his fists, jaw tightening, shame and anger colliding. Laila's soft voice tried to ease the weight, speaking of faith, of patience. The elder studied them both, his silence a mirror to their turmoil. A single candle flickered between them, its flame bending under the breath of fate. The choice was theirs, but the path was narrow, the ground unsteady. Arman's heart thundered as though already hearing the collapse of walls not yet built. As they stepped out of the elder's hut, the village square had shifted. Clouds gathered above, dimming the golden light into gray. A restless wind stirred dust, children's laughter silenced. Arman's eyes burned with defiance, but Laila's gaze softened with fear. She whispered of destiny, of a storm both within and without. The elder's words clung to them, heavier than chains, shaping steps not yet taken. Arman looked beyond the valley toward distant mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist. Somewhere there lay the test, the reckoning, the chance to reclaim what was lost. The storm had only begun. The storm broke over the valley with a roar, rain hammering rooftops as villagers scrambled for shelter. Arman stood beneath the elder's words, his resolve hardened like tempered steel. Laila clung to her shawl, her eyes fixed on him, fear and faith warring within. The debt weighed heavy, yet Destiny's call pressed louder, urging him toward the mountains. The elder's voice echoed in memory, a warning wrapped in prophecy. Lightning split the sky, casting fleeting brilliance on the path ahead. Arman clenched his jaw, knowing retreat was no longer possible. Their journey would begin not in peace, but in defiance of the storm. The siblings left the village at dawn, their silhouettes fading into a landscape of mist and rain. The mountain path stretched ahead, steep and unforgiving. Arman's steps carried grim determination, each stride echoing with unspoken vows. Laila followed close, her breaths uneven but steady, clutching herbs as though they could shield her from fate. The earth smelled of rain, rich and raw, while the wind carried whispers of unseen trials. Shadows moved within the forest, not beasts, but omens lingering on the edge of sight. Each turn of the path felt like a test, a question demanding an answer neither could yet give. Deep in the forest, silence grew oppressive, broken only by dripping leaves and distant thunder. Arman halted, sensing eyes upon them, though no figure revealed itself. Laila's fingers tightened around his sleeve, fear plain in her touch. Branches swayed unnaturally, and the air thickened with unseen weight. The elder's prophecy lingered. Shadows would test them before destiny revealed its hand. A crow screeched overhead, startling the silence into fragments. Arman drew a breath, steadying his resolve, while Laila whispered prayers into the damp air. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting, as though measuring the worth of their courage. The first trial came not with sword or flame, but with doubt. A voice, low and insidious, rose from the trees, echoing with words neither had spoken yet both feared. It spoke of failure, of debt unpayable, of bonds breaking beneath pressure. Arman's face hardened, though sweat mingled with rain upon his brow. Laila trembled, yet raised her voice in defiance, her words steady, though her body shook. The forest stilled, listening, waiting for their answer. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to bend, every breath heavy with unseen judgment. Their choice was not of strength, but of spirit. The forest fell silent as their defiance echoed, the unseen voices fading into nothing. Arman breathed deeply, the weight on his chest easing for the first time since they left the village. Laila lowered her hands, her prayers answered in stillness, though her eyes remained alert. Beyond the trees a faint glow shimmered, not fire, but something older, purer. It beckoned them forward, a promise and a warning entwined. Arman stepped first, the mud sucking at his boots, his heart steadying to a rhythm older than fear. The path had not ended, it had only revealed itself in sharper light. The clearing revealed a shrine half buried in moss and stone, its carvings weathered by centuries of rain. Arman felt a pulse beneath his feet, as though the ground carried a heartbeat older than memory. Laila's breath caught, her eyes drawn to the runes glowing faintly in the stone. The storm had faded to a drizzle, each drop striking with a quiet rhythm. The silence was thick, filled with reverence and warning. Arman touched the altar, and warmth spread through his arm, burning yet steady. Laila whispered that destiny had brought them here, but her voice trembled. The shrine answered with light. The altar stirred, and light erupted, spilling into the clearing like dawn. Figures formed within the radiance, shadows of ancestors, faces noble yet stern. Arman bowed his head, though his jaw clenched with the weight of their gaze. Laila fell to her knees, whispering prayers, her hands trembling against the damp soil. The voices spoke without sound, carried on the current of the heart. They named his debt, not of coin, but of courage, a price to be paid in choice. Fear pressed heavy, yet Arman lifted his head, willing to listen, willing to bear. Laila's eyes brimmed with both terror and awe. The vision deepened. The ancestors showed a mountain torn by fire, rivers of ash swallowing villages whole. They revealed choices, paths diverging like veins of molten rock. One path demanded sacrifice, another demanded betrayal. Arman's chest tightened as if crushed beneath the weight of worlds. Laila reached for him, her touch anchoring him to the present. Her voice trembled, reminding him he was not alone, that the debt was theirs to bear together. The vision fractured into shards of light, embedding within his soul like burning stars. The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. The shrine's glow faded, leaving only the forest and the steady patter of rain. Arman staggered, his breath ragged, though fire still burned in his eyes. Laila rose slowly, her shawl soaked, her expression firming into quiet strength. She no longer trembled, her voice steadied as she vowed to stand beside him no matter the cost. Arman turned toward the mountains beyond, their peaks shrouded in storm clouds. The path ahead was perilous, but the prophecy had taken shape. Together they carried the weight, no longer as siblings bound by blood alone, but as partners chosen by fate. As night fell, they made camp at the forest's edge, firelight flickering against wet stone and dripping branches. Arman stared into the flames, the visions replaying behind his eyes, each choice like a dagger twisting deeper. Laila sat across from him, drying herbs by the fire, her face calmer than before, though shadows lingered in her gaze. The storm rumbled far away, but the night held its own weight, heavy and watchful. In the quiet, Arman spoke aloud his vow. He would pay the debt, no matter the cost. Laila met his eyes, and with a single nod sealed the pact. The road curved into a valley where fog clung to the ground like ghosts, unwilling to leave. Arman kept his sword close, his step steady, though unease crawled beneath his skin. Laila walked beside him, her shawl pulled tight against the cold, her eyes scanning the shadows. The silence was unnatural, broken only by the crunch of wet leaves underfoot. At the valley's heart, the mentor appeared, waiting like a sentinel. His eyes bore centuries of knowledge, but also sorrow. He spoke of the cost to come, of debts that consumed more than blood. His words were sharp as steel, undeniable as fate. The mentor's voice carried across the fog, each word weighted with regret. He warned that fate demanded not just strength but sacrifice, and that no one who bore its burden escaped untouched. Arman clenched his fists, unwilling to bow to inevitability. Laila's gaze flickered with doubt, yet her silence spoke louder than her breath. The valley seemed to close in, shadows creeping closer as though summoned by his words. Then, almost reluctantly, the mentor offered guidance, a relic hidden deep within ruins, capable of bending destiny itself. The choice to seek it lay with them, and them alone. That night, the fire burned low as rain whispered against the canopy. Arman sat sharpening his blade, his reflection split in the steel, while Laila studied a fragment of parchment given by the mentor. The writing shimmered faintly, ancient and restless. Tension hummed between them, unspoken but undeniable, as though words might fracture what little balance remained. Laila finally asked if he feared the cost, her voice quiet, her eyes steady. Arman lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and admitted fear lingered, but his resolve held stronger. The flames flickered between them, casting long shadows like truths half hidden. The ruins revealed themselves at dawn, carved from jagged stone, broken arches clawing at the sky. Mist wrapped the shattered walls, where ivy hung like tattered banners. Inside, silence reigned, heavy and watching. Arman stepped first, his hand steady on his blade, while Laila's fingers brushed the stones, feeling the echoes of centuries past. The air grew heavy with unseen presence, a warning etched in every crack. Then, deep within the ruin's heart, the relic glimmered faintly on a pedestal of obsidian. Its light was neither warm nor cold, but alive, shifting as though it breathed. As Arman reached for the relic, shadows exploded across the chamber. From the mist stepped the enemy, cloaked in darkness, eyes burning like embers. His voice mocked them, dripping venom, as he revealed he had guided them here, not to claim the relic, but to doom themselves with it. Laila froze, her hand hovering near Arman's arm, torn between fear and defiance. The relic pulsed brighter, caught between their grasp and the villain's will. The chamber shook, dust falling like ash, as choice loomed over them, seize destiny, or fall beneath its curse. The relic's glow burst outward, flooding the chamber in light that stripped the shadows bare. Arman staggered, but felt a current surge through him, power ancient and untamed awakening inside his veins. His grip on the sword tightened, the steel trembling as if it recognized the energy coursing through him. Laila shielded her eyes, her breath sharp with awe and fear. The villain snarled, his cloak writhing as though alive, trying to resist the force. For a heartbeat, Arman saw fragments of forgotten battles, blades clashing beneath storms, his face mirrored in warriors across time. His destiny was no longer hidden. Visions flooded Arman's mind. He saw himself, centuries past, standing beside Laila in different guises, always bound, always torn apart by fate. Their hands reaching across lifetimes, their love never surviving the end. The truth seared into him. They were not merely allies, nor strangers pulled into war. but lovers reborn across ages, cursed to forget until the cycle returned. His breath hitched, the revelation crushing and liberating at once. Laila's gaze locked with his, horror and recognition blooming together. The villain's laughter echoed, cruel and triumphant, for he had counted on this moment to break them. The fallen hero emerged from the shadows, armor scarred, eyes dark with pain. His voice cut like steel, confessing his betrayal. Once bound to them, he had chosen the villain's side, lured by promises of freedom from fate's cruelty. Arman's jaw hardened, fury warring with grief. Laila whispered his name, her voice breaking with disbelief. For a moment, the chamber felt smaller, the relic pulsing harder, as if feeding on that turmoil. The fallen hero raised his blade, not with joy, but with resignation, ready to strike against those who had once trusted him with their lives. The shapeshifter revealed their hand at last. Their form unraveled, twisting through smoke and shadow before settling into a single truth. No longer the ally they had seemed. Their smile curled with malice as they bowed toward the villain. Betrayal thickened the air, slicing deeper than any blade. Arman's rage cracked, his aura flaring as sparks burned around him. Laila's heart stung, the faces of trust now splintered. The shapeshifter declared allegiance not from loyalty but survival, feeding on chaos that stretched across centuries. The villain welcomed them with open arms, shadows closing tighter around the chamber. The villain stepped forward, his voice rising above the storm of emotions. He declared the relic was never meant to save but to curse, feeding on cycles of love and ruin to keep eternity fractured. His hand hovered above its glow, shadows warping as if obeying him. Dust rained from the ceiling as the ruins shook, the past and present colliding in violent waves. Arman stood his ground, every muscle taut, the truth of his reincarnated bond burning in his chest. Laila's fingers brushed his arm not to restrain, but to anchor him. The final stage of their war had begun. The ruins shaking grew violent as the mentor appeared at the chamber's edge, his staff glowing faintly with runes. He stepped into the chaos, his voice carrying authority even as dust and stone fell around him. He warned that the relic's curse could not be broken without sacrifice, that one life must burn so the cycle might end. Arman protested, his rage bursting in sparks, while Laila's silence cut deeper than any blade. The villain laughed, certain no one would choose the path. But the mentor's eyes held no hesitation. His life, already heavy with centuries, was ready to pay. The mentor struck the staff into the ground, runes blazing like fire. Energy surged through the chamber, forcing even the villain to stumble back. He turned toward Arman and Laila, urging them to finish what he could not. His words were a plea and a command, leaving no room for refusal. Arman's chest tightened as the old man's form began to fracture into light. Laila's cry tore the silence, her hand outstretched but unable to stop what had begun. The chamber roared, swallowing the mentor in brilliance, his sacrifice sealing the first crack in fate's endless cycle. The relic pulsed harder, its hunger inflamed by the mentor's sacrifice. The sidekick, who had hidden near the edges, stumbled forward. His voice shook but carried resolve, as he declared he would not let their sacrifice end in vain. Though younger, weaker, and trembling, he drew a dagger and placed himself between Arman and the villain. The chamber quieted, for even the shadows seemed to hesitate. His courage was no grand blaze, but a steady flame that refused to falter. Arman's eyes softened, pride mixing with dread. The villain sneered, calling him a child, but even children changed destiny. The villain unleashed a wave of shadows, tendrils lashing like serpents, tearing stone apart as they struck. Arman roared, his sword blazing with awakened power, meeting the darkness head-on. Sparks burst as steel and shadow collided, filling the chamber with violent flashes. Laila raised her hands, weaving the relic's light into shields that fractured and reformed with each strike. The sidekick held ground, his dagger glowing faintly as if blessed by the mentor's lingering spirit. The ruin cracked open, light from the sky spilling in, as though heaven itself demanded witness to the clash of destiny and despair. In the chaos, the villain's strike split the ground, dividing them. Arman clung to one side, Laila trapped on the other, her shield shattering under relentless assault. Their eyes locked across the divide, both knowing fate's cruelty had returned to claim them. The sidekick cried out, rushing toward Laila, but the collapse widened. The villain's laughter rose, echoing against stone and storm. Arman screamed her name, fury igniting around him, as if the world itself threatened to break beneath his rage. In that instant, love and war collided, and fate's cruelest hand tore them apart once again. The storm above shattered the last remnants of sky as the villain loomed over Laila, his shadows reaching to bind her. Arman, across the chasm, burned with fury, his voice tearing through the chaos as he swore he would not lose her again. His rage bent the relic's light toward him, forming a bridge of fire and brilliance across the divide. The villain's mocking laughter faltered as Arman charged, his body glowing with energy too great to hold. Laila's eyes widened, torn between terror and awe, as the moment became the culmination of lifetimes of love and loss. The villain met Arman mid-bridge, their clash erupting in sparks that lit the ruin like dawn. Every strike carried centuries of hatred, love, and betrayal bound in steel and shadow. Laila screamed for Arman to hold on, her chains glowing brighter as she pulled against them, her determination feeding his strength. The relic pulsed, resonating with their unity, as if love itself could bend fate's hand. For the first time, the villain faltered, his grin replaced with fury, his strikes desperate. He realized too late that he faced not just one soul, but two bound across eternity. Laila's cry broke the relic's final barrier, shattering her chains into shards of light. She surged forward, her hands joining Arman's as they struck in unison, blade and light piercing the villain's chest. His scream was not rage, but despair, as if all his centuries of hunger had led only to this end. His form dissolved into smoke and dust, swallowed by the storm, leaving silence in his wake. Arman collapsed to his knees, trembling with exhaustion, while Laila caught him, her tears falling on his scorched skin. For the first time in lifetimes, victory felt real. The storm parted, revealing a sky streaked with dawn's first colors. The ruin stilled, broken but quiet, as if the world itself exhaled relief. The sidekick stumbled forward, battered but alive, his dagger still glowing faintly with the mentor's lingering blessing. He looked at them, smiling through tears, whispering that fate had finally been defied. Arman leaned against Laila, whispering that they had only won because they had chosen love over fear. Her smile, fragile but true, carried centuries of longing finally fulfilled. The world was scarred, but together they had broken the cycle. At the ruin's edge, with dawn painting the horizon, Arman took Laila's hand and whispered that even if the world forgot them again, their love would remain eternal. She kissed him softly, sealing the promise not in words but in breath and touch. The sidekick turned away respectfully, gazing at the sky, knowing legends were born in such moments. As light bathed them, their silhouettes seemed carved from eternity, as though fate itself bowed to their bond. The story ended not with death or despair but with the quiet, unyielding truth: forgotten or remembered, love endures.